We welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. Why do we learn? What do we learn? And how do we apply what we learn in the real world? These were some of the questions I wanted to answer when I started the podcast. This is an audio and video show where I interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. On each episode of this show, I interview a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, I hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized, imagined, and narrated by the guest in our show. Today's guest, Yajur, is someone whose game I came across on LinkedIn, and the game is called Startup High. A little bit about him before we jump into this conversation. Yajur is the founder of Entrepie, a startup making games to teach entrepreneurship in a fun and engaging way. He's focused on impact in three fields: education, entrepreneurship, and gamification. He created a game called Startup High. It's a light strategy board game based on the startup life. He's a lawyer by profession with a BBA LLB from the National Law University in Jodhpur that he recently graduated from. He stays in Gurgaon and he loves playing sports. So, Yajur, to get started, I got a chance to play the game and I really, really enjoyed it myself. But before we jump into the game, and your journey as an entrepreneur as well, I'd love to know a little bit about your childhood. I was looking up, you went to Amity International School. Like, what was Yajur like as a child? What were the things you were curious about at school and outside school? And what were some memories and stories you have that you'd like to maybe share with our listeners today?
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for having me here, Abhishek. And another round of thank you for taking out time and playing the game. It really means a lot, right? You took out time. So for everyone who's listening, so we had a podcast scheduled, I think, a week earlier, right? But Abhishek could not get his hands on the game, so he specifically made an attempt to find out where the game is being played in Bombay. And luckily, at that time there was a community called as Game Mates where the game was taking place, and then you specifically took out time and went to that. Thank you so much. It really means a lot. I really appreciate it. And yes, on to the question which you had. So, very interesting question. I think uh, uh, when I think about my childhood, I don't think I did any particular action because I had an interest in a particular thing, but it was just out of curiosity I did that, right? So when I say this, the first very early memory which comes back to me is I was in seventh grade and I was organizing cricket tournaments amongst societies in Gurgaon. So if you ask me why I did that, it was my objective to make, did we make money? A bit which we spent, right? But was my objective to make money? No. It was simply because I loved cricket so much. We liked playing cricket so much that it was like, okay, if IPL is coming up and all of these things are coming up, then why can't we start something of our own, right? So, right to the multiple stories. So, I think as I was a child, was more on the curious end. That I also want. If I got interested in something, if I got to know about something, I want to do it, right? So, right from movie making to learning drums to playing sports to taking part in extra co-curriculars, I think my school life has been full of experiments and activities and hidden trials just because I wanted to explore and I wanted to look up things, right? So I think if I have to uh, sum up my childhood, it has to it has to be driven by curiosity, nothing else. So my child was essentially driven by curiosity, irrespective of the number of things I did. I think at the end of it, why I did it was only curiosity.
Interesting. And like, did you, like, I'm curious about the adults in your life growing up as well, right? Were you, because, you know, your parents, your guardians are the two people you look at. And like, I came from a business family myself, and I think a lot of that entrepreneurship seed sort of set in me, seeing my family actually run a business and fail and go through the highs and lows of it, because there is a lot of unpredictability in that sort of lifestyle as well, right? So maybe a little bit about the adults in your life and some of the professions and businesses they were involved in.
Right. So I think I belong in a family of entrepreneurs in business, right? So my dad has been a businessman since the very start. He has had multiple businesses. He is now running he's running two businesses in Gurgaon, right? So he's been a businessman. My mom initially was a homemaker, but then she also used to help dad a lot in business. And then I think once COVID hit, she also started something of her own. She also has a catering business, right? My brother, again, I have an elder brother, so he was in the corporate sector for a while, but then now he has also jumped back into the business, right? So I think all around me, I've definitely got risk takers around me, right? And I think like you said, I think once you belong from a business family, right, there are these dinner table conversations which keep on happening so casually that essentially the fundamentals of entrepreneurship, the fundamentals of business, which is risk taking, creativity, problem solving, become very natural to you. That okay, if there is a problem, a business person has to solve it, right? And when you're sitting at a dinner table, uh, when you're hearing a problem, the only thing which you're hearing is solutions. That okay, how can we solve this, right? Rather than cribbing about it. So I think definitely my mentality and my childhood has been shaped up by where I belong, right? And while there's nothing wrong in so again, I don't think there's every coin has two sides, right? So I think someone coming from a corporate family must definitely have a different kind of mindset and mentality and good traits which they must have also built upon, right? Similarly, for a person coming from a business family, the traits which I have imbibed, I think definitely come from my family because it is essentially a business family.
That makes sense, because there are so many unsaid factors that go into building that, mindset. And I think that's like a core mission of Entrepreneur and your work as well, is right, building that entrepreneurial mindset. And, I was just thinking about like your journey and like this is sort of a tangential sort of question. Yajur. Like growing up, was there a product or service that you consumed that you really enjoyed using, that sort of stayed with you? Because I'm just trying to, piece out that entrepreneurship, marketing, business sort of mind that you have there.
No, no, no. I think very interesting questions. I had never thought about this, but now that I'm speaking with you, yes, there was. Lego,
Hmm.
right? So I, as a kid, was obsessed with Lego. I loved creating things. So I think for a brief period of time when I was in third grade or something, I wanted to become an architect. For the simple reason, some relative came from the States and they had this big box of Lego which was given to me. And I, as a child, had nothing to do. So I was just building things, breaking them, building them again, breaking them, trying to build different things which are not even in the manual, right? So I think I was obsessed with Lego, so much so that I also have a huge Batmobile kept right in my room, made up of Lego. So I think that's something which my brother also brought for me. But Lego is something which I think I've tinkered around a lot with. And if you think of it, if you think about it, now that I'm thinking out loud, Lego also stands at the very crux of entrepreneurship in certain way, right? Because entrepreneurship A is about breaking and building, right? You try to build something, it will break. However, still you try or you try to learn from whatever you have built, and then you build in a different direction, right? As in, failures uh, are given in entrepreneurship, right? Uh, so similarly, Lego, whatever you're building, there will be a time when you're not able to build it. There will be a time when you've broken it. There will be a time when you're trying to fix something else with someone else, something else will break apart, fall apart, right? So I think breaking and building is something which I've done a lot through Lego. Problem solving is also one. That okay, now I have got an idea in my mind that I have to create this tall yellow colored building where there are windows in the between, right? Now, if I'm building those Lego blocks and there's some problem which is coming, I don't care about the problem. I will use some other kind of block. I will use some other kind of color block or shape block, just to build the building which I have in mind, right? In fact, there is something called as Lego Serious Play as well. I have only read about it. I haven't taken its workshops and certifications and attended the courses, but that's what they actually do. So I recently came about this concept a couple of months ago, that Lego bricks are basically used to teaching concepts like leadership, communication in corporate workspaces, right? And they're using simple tool like Lego, which I have played a lot with in my childhood. So I think definitely Lego must be one of those tools which I must have used and must have helped in shipping up.
It's yeah, right. Like as soon as you said Lego, Yajur, I started thinking that the branding of Lego is so good that basically Lego is building blocks, but it's a brand associated with building blocks. But unconsciously, we've almost associated building blocks with Lego. Like when you go to the States, for instance, they don't say tissue, they say Kleenex. So I think the branding of them must be something they're doing in branding that makes it so convincing. And like, why isn't there another homegrown like Indian brand that creates? Because I've had a lot of parents tell me that Lego is quite expensive to access, and when you buy the entire set, it's like above a certain budget if you want to buy it in a particular way. So a lot of people just buy the regular blocks that kids can, do it. But really, really interesting, like how you thought about that. And because like I'm a teacher by training, Yajur, and I'm always curious about how people learn, why they learn. So once you were done with school, like in 2019, I know that's when you graduated high
Yeah.
school, you decided to pursue a 5 year degree that's in business and law from the National Law University in Jodhpur. So, what were you thinking in that 11th and 12th standard phase, and why business and law in that particular university for you?
Right. So I think, to be very honest, business is not something which came in my mind firstly, right? It was more about a profession that, okay, law is something which I have an interest in, right? Because I've always had an interest in debating, articulating, researching, finding the fine points, reading between the lines, right, coming up with a solution. So that's something which I think I've extensively developed through extracurricular activities, right? That and international law is something which was of my interest through extracurriculars. So law is something which I decided to pursue, right? And once I went to the college, then I was offered the options of either BBA LLB or BA LLB. And I'm a kind of a person who loves mathematics, who loves reasoning and logic. So uh, for me, it was a no-brainer that, okay, if I were to choose between BBA and BA, so you're only taught the BBA, BA subjects for 3 years. So, and if I'm given the option of choosing math, no math for 3 years, it was very easy for me that yes, I have to have math in the 3 years which I'm studying in some form of math, right? So that's when I went into college, that's when I took BBLLB. But initially in 11th and 12th, I was more along the lines of that let us try doing law, right? I was not very certain that I want to become a lawyer, but law is a good profession. Plus, my mother has always sort of pestered me about UPSC giving the competitive exams for civil services, but I have never been very keen for it, right? Multiple other reasons, but I've never been keen for it. So it was also a go ahead from her that, okay, if you want to do UPSC later, you can do after law, right? The knowledge of law helps. So plus my brother my elder brother wanted to become a lawyer at some point, so that the concept of studying for law was not very alien to me, right? So combining all of these things, it was more of the acha law mein interest hai, let's do law. मतलब it was not about कि अच्छा why not law? What are the other options? What other things do you really want to pursue? I was like, law seems like a good option. Let's do it. And honestly, I did not really give a lot of thought behind it, and I'm glad I did not give a lot of thought behind it. Otherwise, I would have entangled myself in multiple other things, right? Because if you honestly think about it, I don't think there was anyone to tell me about this fact at that time. But if you think about it, whatever the majority of the people, I think, the majority of the people who have studied something are doing something else. You look at the engineers, right? A lot of people become engineers, right? But then shift on to MBA, shift on to different roles, right? I think law is the only profession where we don't see a lot of people shifting careers and shifting professions. But apart from that, people are in all sorts of different fields, right? So I've got multiple friends who have studied engineers but are now building in the crypto space, now building in the sustainable space. I'm saying something different altogether, right? So if someone was to tell me that just choose your undergraduate degree, which you have an interest in, and you figure out the rest later, I think I would have mocked the person at that time when I was in 11th and 12th that how can you do this? This is a big decision for me, right? But in hindsight, I would have said yes. That's how it really happens. If I have an interest, I have an inclination towards something else, I will be drawn to it. I will naturally go towards it, right? If I'm a sort of an active person, I would not want to do some. I would not want to bind myself by my degree, right? So that's what happened as well. So for example, when I was pursuing law, one semester into it, 2 semesters into it, then COVID hit. then I'm like, okay, law is interesting for sure, but startups and entrepreneurship is something which has more of my eye because it is more creative, it has more freedom, and essentially you're trying to solve a problem, right? And you come up with problem solving every day. And plus, when you are into your first 2 years of law school, then you have to the only option when you have to learn law is to intern. And when you're interning as a first, second year, you're not really given much respect, right? Because law is something which you gain a lot by experience, by practice, by years, right? And quite fair. So, कि मतलब, यार, I'm a first, second year law student who has just read contracts and a couple of other subjects in law school, and that too not too completely, right? How can I go up and just provide value to lawyers at that stage, right? So all I want to do was provide value, and providing value was not an option in law, right? Because then you're treating like you're not treated well because you don't have any knowledge of law per se, right? So then essentially I shifted like, "Acha, if I want to create value and if I had an interest in business, why not let's try exploring towards this area, right? But I think again, like I said, majorly in 11, 12, not too much thoughts. Law was something which was familiar to me. My brother had a thought of taking it up. My mother supported me. I had a group of friends who were also taking law. I had an interest in law. So I'm like, let's do it. No stress, not much thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think there's something about law as well, right? That first principles thinking, trying to break down an idea into its policies and laws. I feel like that is an approach that entrepreneurs often have to apply when you are trying to solve a problem, right? And I think like people underestimate the educational aspect of entrepreneurship, right? Because a lot of great ideas can come from studying like foundational disciplines, right? Like whether it's physics, chemistry, sociology, I think you psychology, you're trying to understand the consumer but also trying to bring something new, so you have to study what has already happened before you're able to. And again, you don't want to study too much, then you get lost in that analytical sort of space as well. But and like in India, like for young people growing up in India, especially after liberalization, like the basic mindset for a lot of our parents is we want our kids to be secure, and I think the risk taking ability will be different based on the parents own experience as well.
Of course,
पर हमेशा यही होता है कि if you take the arts, eventually you can move into law. If you take commerce, you can go into like your CA or like finance.
economics, correct,
And then in like science, engineering is the preferred, but you can also do the basic disciplines of physics, chem. But engineering is like your path, and then a lot of people find their own way, along that way. But an interesting conversation when I was playing the game. So I was talking to the person sitting next to me, and I said, I just know the person that made this game, like like as an acquaintance on LinkedIn. And then he told me like वो करता क्या है? He's like वो board games बनाता है, बस board games बनाता है, कुछ और नहीं करता है. So there's like this fascination for like different careers, in India, and I feel like young people are really interested in how you can build these journeys. And I feel like for a long time, we didn't have the tools to do that. We didn't have the internet. Like in India, for instance, we had just one TV channel till 1990, right? So these different careers are also really interesting. And I think with AI coming in, you're going to see a lot of young people having jobs in multiple careers, and like when I was looking at your journey in university, Ajur, in this 5 year period, almost every year like you took up like an internship, in your first year you were like an intern at um, I think it was Lawyer Up, which is like a small organization. Then you worked in this Nair Ventures, like a venture capital accelerator. And then you worked in like the founder's office of Food Tech Ventures. And you also started like another company called Denham, which sells like jeans made out of hemp. And these
correct.
were spread across like, different years. And you were almost building and rebuilding, building and rebuilding. So what did you learn from each of these experiences, because I know you credit the Nair Ventures time to really develop your entrepreneurial thinking. So if you could break that down, like what did you learn from each and how did it get you to where you are today, that would be really nice to hear.
Right. So I think very interesting question and a very detailed one as well. But where should I start? There are multiple touch points. Okay. So I think first, let me just take up experiences, right? Then I think I had a couple of pointers which I had a couple of analogies for you by what you said in the beginning, right? So I think Yes, at the very heart of it, no, I believe that trying is something which everyone should do. For example, अगर I went to a sister's wedding recently, right? My first cousin got married. So उधर लोग पूछ रहे हैं कि आप करते क्या हो? All I say है कोशिश, right? Because all a human can do is try, right? And what I'm trying essentially right now is also just trying to build a startup, right? It's very difficult to bring something from default to default alive. However, why I want to do it is because I have this thought in my mind which I want to execute in real life, right? So similarly, I think all throughout my college life as well, I just wanted to try different things, right? That अच्छा ये होता कैसे है try करके देख लेते हैं एक बार. So the lawyer app was something which I did online. So again, first year into law school, right? In the COVID hit, then we all were supposed to come back home, right? So we all came back home in March 2020, and we were like, okay, we don't know what to do, right? Because college has shifted online. It's very new for everyone, right? So I think everyone took a lot of months to settle in just at first, understand the seriousness of the situation, deal with the seriousness of the situation, right? And then once that fog started to clear a bit, right, the pandemic, then I started, "Acha, let's try out the experiences." So my first thing was that I want to do a startup of my own. I have an idea with a friend of mine in the construction space that we want to digitize the construction industry. The workers and everyone are too much of manual. They don't have technology, right? Let's just adopt technology in construction industry. So that's something which we worked on for 6 months. We're only in an ideation stage for the 6 months because we really did not know what to do, right? We had an idea, we wanted to execute it, but we didn't really know what would be the next step, or we couldn't really take the next step. So that's when we decided that acha, instead of trying to build something from scratch because we're not aware of it, why not let's start learning from other people, right? And that's when he went his own way, I went my own way. We started different internship experiences, right? So all the all the legal internship experiences, particularly the lawyer up, right, was a good experience in terms of just trying to understand and know about the legal space, right? All other internships, all other experiences, primarily the one at Nair Ventures and the food tech ventures, is something which taught me a lot about business hands-on because I was working directly with the founders. I was directly involved in making decisions, and whatever I decisions I made had an impact. So usually, I think one of my core learning experiences out of these internships, out of these experiences of mine, have been that I have been entrusted with the responsibility of something, and it is not like someone is there to babysit me, right? So, for example, my idea of internships is very different from what others have, I believe, right? Internships for other people is acha kaam mila, you do it, and then someone else will check it and it will go out, right? But rather for me, those experiences were like projects that they are giving me something to do. I have to do it entirely from start to end, right? From idea to execution, 0 to 100. Agar, for example, we have to even make something from a video editor on Upwork, Fiverr, no? I have to think about, okay, that what are the instructions I will be giving him? What will the output, well, what is my input for him? What is the output which will be giving me? What will be my input based on the output which is giving for some other person who's further working on that, right? I think that's not something which a lot of people have. Both of these experiences actually helped me do this. My second internship experience at Food Tech Ventures, the founder Ashutosh Mahendra, who is also a very close mentor to me, what he said when I was into his office the first day is, "I will throw you out in the sea. I will throw you out in the ocean with a problem of mine. You have to find the solution to that problem and then come back to the shore without troubling me. That's all you have to do." Right? And I absolutely love that. He's just giving me a problem and then he's throwing it out. Right. And he's throwing me away with it. He's like, do whatever you want, contact whomever you want. You have some bit of resources, right? Just try to figure out and then come back to me. Right. And I think that's how internship should be, that you're given a problem and go figure it out. Right. Because that's when your thinking increases. That's when you actually go from idea to execution. Right. And so, based on these experiences, then came up Denham. Denham was basically a sustainable fashion venture started by me and some friends in college, uh, primarily for a competition. But this is something which we had. Okay, why not? Let's start. Right. So to start for based on a competition called as HULT, which basically had the theme of sustainable fashion, and I've always had an interest in fashion, plus with a couple of friends of mine. So we were like, okay, let's find out, let's take part in this competition. And then things started growing much more serious than what we expected. And then we ultimately made 50 jeans made out of hemp. So we had pre-order, we made it open for everyone. A lot of our friends and family pitched in, and we had 50 orders to 50 jeans to make. So that's something which we then finally worked towards, made the 50 orders, and then distributed out to friends and family. And so that's a good feeling. So Denham has been shelved as of now. We're not continuing Denham because, uh, again, feet in too many boats. Number one, number two, that's a capital heavy business, right? But with Denham also, it gave a good feeling of achievement that if I am to go out and truly represent myself, or if I want to feel myself, I will wear my jeans. Right? I'll not wear any other jeans, I'll wear my jeans. So just a feeling of good, it's just a good internal feeling which you have that, okay, you're wearing something which you made, right? Other people are wearing something which you made. It's just a good feeling to have. So Denham was also a good side project which you took on. And I think one of the learnings from that is also just hitting it out, just trying it out. You never know what will work or not. These jeans, for example, are great product. We're not continuing it, but definitely could be taken up in the next possible future. And I don't know if this knowledge of my and all of this information which I gathered while looking up for denim will be useful or not in the future. But I'm pretty sure it will be, right? Some in some place or the other. So that's something which I'm dependent upon.
Yeah, like so many like different experiences that you acquired, Yajur. And I think in a lot of ways that was your entrepreneurship education, because you were building, like recreating, building, learning from founders that have actually built in the real world. And I think it's not easy to simulate that experience in an educational environment, like because I mean it's very hard to have that experience of taking decisions that are applied in the real world in an institution, because there's no incentive for the institution to apply that thinking immediately, right? So it's more theoretical, but it's very creative to access internships in like different fields, because like there could have been a bias for you to maybe stick to something that's purely law related, but I think your course was also structured to open it up, right, with business and law, where in the first 3 years you were doing business and then law. So
Uh, hmm. So
go ahead.
this is just a small bit of correction. No, so it's actually that we are taught law the entirety of the 5 years. So in the 3 years, we have two subjects per semester relating to business, right? So I'm not too sure if they had a very positive, if those subject matters had a very great impact on me for the simple reason is first 2 semesters, 1.5 semesters were offline, and then we later transitioned into online, right? And 20-year-old back in 2020, having online classes and the entirety of the day and the time to mull around with, I don't think I really listened to those classes in all honesty, right? So I don't think those particular classes had a very huge impact on me, but rather I would give credit to my school life here as well because in school as well, all the extra co-curriculars I was involved with, right? So, for example, one of the things which I missed out during my childhood was I told you about the competition thing which I organized tournament way back in seventh, eighth grade. But in tenth, in the entirety of my tenth grade, what I was doing is I was essentially running a business in school. I was not the one to attend classes. What I did is there was this competition called a School Enterprise Challenge, right? By some kind of organization in the UK. And my teacher just told me about it, and she was like, "कि अच्छा ठीक है, registration जा चुकी है. We only." She told me the one day that see if you want to register for this. It's a new competition. I said okay. The next day I come up to her. I'm like, "Ma'am, it's a great competition. In this competition, you have to run a business in school for the next 6 months, and you have to fill out a business plan and everything. And it's just not just theory, just practical work as well. As in all the other competitions related to entrepreneurship and startups are usually piecemeal in the sense that." Uh, build a business plan or build a pitch deck, right? I don't think that contributes as much to your growth as when you do it yourself, right? So I told the teacher that this is the competition, we want to register for it. She's like, no, no, the deadline has passed, it won't happen. But this curiosity in me had gotten there, right? As it was there that now I want to do this competition, no matter what I'm doing this competition. I wrote an email to those guys that here I'm a student from MT International School Sector 46 Gurgaon, and I want to really, really take part in this competition. And the deadline has passed. Could you please make an exception for us and extend the deadline? The reply back was a yes, sure. right? So the deadline gets extended, we apply to the competition, and then for the next 6 months, we're just running a business in school. So the business was selling pottery products. So what we did, we basically got involved in the business of trading, right? So for example, I think one of the best ways to also learn entrepreneurship, in my opinion, if you have to learn by doing, is get involved in the business of trading, right? Because if you trading is something in which कि मैंने यहाँ से 5 रुपए पे सामान उठाया और मैंने कुछ अपनी वैल्यू ऐड करके यहाँ पे 10 रुपए में बेच दिया. Value addition is also not necessary, right? But basically taking stuff modern, the old day drop shipping, basically traditional drop shipping, right? Because at that time in 10th grade we could not have created something, right? We did not have the skills for getting giving services, right? And वो इंडिया में दिवाली का टाइम था. There was a whole festive period going on. It started in July, I think, the competition, right? So what we did was that जो सारे potters होते हैं रोड साइड गुड़गांव में, हम उनके पास गए. हमने बल्क में बहुत ज्यादा सामान खरीदा, राइट? सामान हमने लिया. I asked my friends, all the students at that time wanted to bunk classes, right? So I made a huge list of permission of all my friends, gave it to the coordinator that we need these many number of students for doing work, right? They got out of the class. We got one classroom assigned to them. They are just simply there chatting away and decorating all the pottery stuff, right? So the students are doing the artwork. We have just sold them at a lower price, and now we are selling them at annual days and exhibitions by going to different societies, by setting up a stall in our school and everything. So that's something which really, just in hindsight, when I think about it, had a good impact on me in terms of, acha, let's do this, right? So the point which I was trying to make essentially is that school life is definitely has been instrumental in helping me shape up. B, the other point which you focused on, which is how to learn about all of this, right? How to learn entrepreneurship. A very an analogy which I find good enough is that you can only learn flying as a pilot if you if you actually sit in the plane and fly, right? If you sit in that simulator and fly, right? But before being able to actually sit in that simulator as well, someone needs to teach you what are the buttons, what are the tools you have, what button will do what, right? And that is something which you're missing, I feel, in India. So again, talking specifically about entrepreneurship, I feel a lot of people want to become entrepreneurs. A lot of people want to become startup founders, and that is something. And the education is something which is missing, right? The education will not guarantee that you will become a successful founder, but it will better the odds of you becoming a successful entrepreneur,
Hmm.
right? While entrepreneurship is a lot subjective, it is driven a lot by instincts. But if I'm aware as an entrepreneur as to what is my arsenal, what are the guns I have, what is the artillery I have, what is the ammunition I have, right? I will be better equipped to deal with the problem is all I'm saying. And that is something which you want to achieve through entrepreneurial education. And learning by doing is obviously the best, right? But not everyone is. So I consider myself very fortunate to be able to take a risk and start something of my own, right? Not everyone has that kind of cushioning. Not everyone has that kind of risk-taking capabilities. Does that mean that they should be robbed of learning about entrepreneurship? No, because entrepreneurship is such a multidisciplinary subject that you are always someone else first and then an entrepreneur second, right? So whenever, for example, we take workshops in schools, I give the examples. I give multiple examples as to what do they people think whether they're an entrepreneur or not, right? So for example, I show them the product. So for example, I show them the Gmail logo, right? And then I'm like, do you think the person who made the Gmail is an entrepreneur? They're like, yes, they made Gmail. Everyone is using it. It's a great value addition. Then I tell them that okay, Gmail was made by a gentleman called as Mr. Paul Bushett, if I'm not wrong, and he was a developer at Google. Then they're confused then as to how a developer can
Hmm.
make the Gmail. I'm like, yes, the founders of Google did not make Gmail. There was an employee at Google who founded the problem of communication, decided to solve it, made up Gmail, pitched the idea, obviously went to the battles. Him and his team made Gmail, right? And even though he's a developer, he's an entrepreneur because he's adding value, right? So entrepreneur is always a second tag which you have after whatever profession you have is what I would like to believe, that you become someone first and then you decide to then you become an entrepreneur, right? Again, not true in all cases, but all I'm trying to prove a point is entrepreneur is so multidisciplinary that anyone can become an entrepreneur, right? Any lawyer, any senior who is practicing, who has opened up his own chamber is an entrepreneur, right? Any of my lawyers, so he's a lawyer as well as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So entrepreneurship is so embedded into our lives that we really want to teach about entrepreneurship to everyone. It is not something which you should होल्ड वेरी डियर दैट अच्छा अगर आप स्टार्टअप कर रहे हो या फिर रिस्क ले रहे हो तभी आपको आना चाहिए. It is something which should be taught to everyone like a mindset. So ideal solution is learn by doing. If you can't learn by doing, then sandbox environment. And before the sandbox environment as well, before to actually make people curious about it so that they go and put themselves in a sandbox environment, you need tools like games, like other things, which basically embed entrepreneurship into the culture so that you uh, get introduced to it and then you're like, हाँ यार ये मुझे try करना है, इसके बारे में सीखना है मेरे को. तब
Mm.
जाके तुम you go to sandbox and then you go by learning by doing is what my understanding is as of now.
Yeah, because that framework is quite interesting, like that sandbox actually doing it and then having like a low stakes introduction sort of space, which I feel like Startup High really, feeds that need really well, because I think I put up the post that I failed in that game. Or kuch hua nahi, I was still happy because I had a good conversation, right? Like my game didn't work out because of luck, because of market forces, or it was my first time too,
Correct.
and I think a lot of people, especially now because of the media popularization of this term of entrepreneurship, with shows like Shark Tank, the focus is so much on the celebrity side of, living that lifestyle. But like someone like you, for instance, Yajur, no one sees the many years that you grew up in a business family, the many failed ventures, whether it's the 10th standard project, I mean, like many projects, you wouldn't say they're failed, right? Then, starting Denham, all the internships that you put time into. So it's like almost 10 to 15 years of effort that you've constantly thought about this, to get to where you are at in different ways, and I feel like that is something that is not easy to sort of easily pick up when someone meets you. They just look at you and they see the product and make a judgment that this is
Mm.
amazing, but I feel like that effort is something that you were able to create. And like I'm just sharing like an experience. Like for me, I felt like in Bombay, there's this IIT Bombay E-Fest that I thought was an interesting low stakes environment to learn about entrepreneurship. I don't know, watching Shark Tank was like an interesting experience for me. Playing Monopoly as a board game where, you're constantly negotiating, trying to trade, that was an interesting experience for me. So apart from Startup High, if you had to recommend some low stakes like experiences to engage with
Mm.
entrepreneurship, what would you recommend based on your uh, experience?
That's a very interesting question, you know. Um,
Like you can just tell me some things that like one thing was networking on LinkedIn. Like this podcast is actually, because I don't know too much about it, talking to you has also helped me open my eyes to different forms of entrepreneurship. So for me, this is like a low stakes learning experience where,
Podcasts always are. Yes, podcasts always are.
and I know you, like, can you tell me a little bit about the podcast that you started about entrepreneurship? Maybe that can be like a fun like segue.
Yes, yes. I'll definitely talk about the podcast. I'll just come back to the first question. So before that, I also want to address something. I think you mentioned about the years of hard work, right? So definitely less for me, not in 15 years. But I think that's the case with everything, right? Because as cliched as it sounds, Rome actually wasn't built in a day. And that is something which a lot of people fail to see, including myself, right? Because there are these high set of targets and expectations which we set that we have to achieve, and when we are not able to achieve, we sort of become disappointed, right? And those, if I think at the very crux of it, those expectations themselves are so unrealistic because you want everything fast, right? The virtue of being patient is actually something which is become very rare these days. So that's just the problem with the current the way how things are going with respect to the short attention span, the attention span essentially decreasing, right? So I think that's a problem with everyone, particularly the younger generation as well. But very interesting question which you asked after that was what are the small experiences one can take uh, for entrepreneurship, right? So just a quick counter question to that. who is the intended target audience for that? Are these school students, college students, graduates, employees? Who exactly?
So I'm thinking like college students and people that have just graduated that are in their
Hmm.
first job that are also exploring other options. So I'm thinking like, 18 to 26, 27, and maybe people that won't start up for the next 3 or 4 years, but just curious about it.
Hmm. Uh, I think, one of the exciting ways would be to just build something in the area which you have. In the area, for example, you have an interest in, right? To take your example itself, for example, you're a teacher, right? You have had always an interest in learning and teaching, right? And I think podcast is a great way to do that, right? So you're building this podcast to satisfy your curiosity towards learning and teaching, right? Because that is basically what is happening with the help of this podcast, right? I had an interest in gaming and startups, and I just wanted to create a game on startups. That's how the whole entrepreneur life was. That's how the whole journey of entrepreneur started, right? So I think whatever interest you have in, just start building out something. It can be a movie, it can be a game, it can be a podcast, it can be a book, it can be a solution, it can be a tool, right? So the only thing is that just find out your common set of people who have an interest in those things, right? Try to find out what, if you can make something, what will be of value addition to that kind of community, to your friends, to your community, to you, whosoever, right? And just try building out something. With the advent of Chat GPT and other AI technologies, I don't think there is a lot of effort in the effort taken to create something from scratch is greatly reduced, right? If you were to now ask me that can I write a book? I can write a book. I'm not too sure the success or the failure of it. Can I direct a movie? Yes, I can direct a movie. I can make a movie, right? I'm not too again sure कितनी अच्छी होगी कितने लोगों को पसंद आएगी बट मैं बना सकता हूँ ठीक है एंड अगर मेरा उसमें इंटरेस्ट अच्छे से है तो but naturally it will come out, right? And if anyone's expecting the first version to be a hit, then they are nothing but a fool, right? Because the first version will always not be good, right? It's a version one at trying at something. You don't become an expert in version one at all, never, right? So that's something which you pick up through multiple failed iterations. So I think first thing would be for me would be just to build out something which is exceptionally low cost, which is just you can put something out there to showcase to people that you have an interest in something. First would be that if you are very proactive, if you tend to have a lot of time, or if you're able to make out time. Second would be I don't know if I would do this or not, but I think just take up projects with people, that there are so many different ideas. So there is no dearth of ideas, right? Ideas are available everywhere. Execution is what it matters. And then ultimately, I think distribution is as well. So just work with people, just work on projects to, take up things. This is for graduates, right? Once you've graduated, you can't really, you're working or you're doing something of your own, so you only have spare bit of time. So I think work on projects is something which I would suggest. Then shows to हो ही गया हमारे Shark Tank जैसे, right? I think Shark Tank have done a great job. Then games हो गया. But yeah, I think more or less वो है. For college students, it becomes different. It becomes more of internships and project opportunities. And here, I think the college students are doing that. That is not the issue. But the issue is the mindset. So I have personally have interacted with a lot of college students while building up my startup. The mindset which they have towards entrepreneurship is still not where we want them to be, right? For example, again, I don't know how. I think I had that mindset where the people who were my employers might think differently, but I think I like to dive into the problem, right? Whatever is being given, I want to think through and through, and that's what they taught me, right? But the students these days, they don't have that much of an experience. They don't have that much of a mindset to learn and unlearn things, right? Or to execute from scratch. So I think the idea is to just be involved with projects, right? Either build something of your own, or either if you're a college student, be involved in projects. However, think from an execution point of view. To sum it up, yes,
Makes sense. Yeah. And I
yes.
think,
Now, yeah,
yeah,
good.
the reason I delved so much into your background, Yajur, because I feel like that's what your journey and so much so represents, right? Like the game that we see today, there's such a huge, that's like the island that we see. And I feel like there's so much I wanted to understand in terms of the background, which I feel we were able to do. But now, for the last few questions, like the last section of this, I wanted to ask you about Startup High. In the game, there are four main sort of areas, which is technology, marketing, business operations, and what is it?
Business development and operations, yes.
Perfect. So, can you tell me about the Startup High journey by maybe focusing on these four areas, right from ideation to execution and distribution? If you can break that down for me.
Yes,
This is focusing on like a game designer that's interested in the same process without revealing, whatever you can't reveal, but just giving us an overview of the process.
correct. So I think everything's public already. So for all the people who have an interest in this, there is a portion of my website called as Game Theory, in which I have documented my entire journey of making this game from scratch, right? So if anyone is interested, then that is the place for a detailed answer for sure, right? But if I were to just take a bird's view out of this, so uh, my journey, I think, has the game would have definitely come out a lot quicker, right? So just now making comments from a hindsight point of view, right? That it initially started off with an idea to make a card game on startups, right? Because gaming is something which I had an interest in. Gaming is something which I think so motivates a lot of people around us. It's a good pastime activity, right? And about startups, why? Because we need to integrate startups more into the culture, right? So that's where the idea was born that acha, we want to make a game on startups. And the idea is just to integrate startups more into the culture, right? That if I am a founder of a startup and my friend is also founder of a different startup, we're bound to crack jokes. If you're bound to crack jokes, that sort of ingrains into our culture, right? For example, just like how Shark Tank is done. So that was the idea कि अच्छा इससे start off करते हैं. The idea was the card game, right? The first game which I made, it could not last for more than 2 minutes. When I tried playing the game with my friends back in college, I was there for an event. Uh, it was 2022. We could not play for more than 2 minutes. We tried playing, they did not have fun at all. We are like, अच्छा, what to do, what not to do. यार इसमें तो मजा नहीं आ रहा यार. Right? Then I went back to the drawing board. So the final version of Startup High, which you see, is the 13th version of the game, right? So number one thing which has been in my journey through and through is that there have been multiple iterations and there has been a feedback loop for the same. Is that being that if I wanted to make a game, it is just very important to just put out whatever you have in your mind. If you're making a card game, make a simple design on Canva, get it printed, get it tested. Fail fast. And that is something which I did. That you have to fail fast in making a game because the only way you can get to know whether it is a good game or not is by trying it. Right? There is no other substitute to it. There is no amount of code, there is no amount of brainstorming which you can do till then you actually try it in real life, right? And trying it with different people and multiple number of times. Because, so for example, if I take Startup High, the final version of Startup High to an audience who's not into board games, who's not into startups, does not like to do kind of these things, it will be a bad experience for them, right? If I were to only table my game in the development process to such people, then obviously I'd be disheartened, right? So the idea is to try out. So that's what I did as well. So when I made the first game, did not work, went back to drawing board, second version, played, did not work, drawing board, third version. Okay, did not work, but there is this component which I'm liking, right? So fourth, I made the fourth version while borrowing the concept from the third version, right? Did, did it out. So two things are working now. One thing from the third version, one thing from the fourth version. Now let's move on to the fifth version. Take a fifth version guy, tried making something, did not work. Went back to a drawing board from the scratch. Then maybe took an idea from the third version and then build it out in the fifth or sixth version, right? So that is something which I did. Personally, my journey of game design, I think, was too extensive because unfortunately, I am a perfectionist or I was a perfectionist. I'm trying to dissociate myself with that concept because I don't think that is a good thing. But the simple reason is I want everyone, if I want everything to be perfect, I'm not okay with, things not being okay. And you should be, because when you're building things, not everything can be perfect. So in startups, in how we define startups, in startup partners, something called as MVP, minimum viable proposition, right? That whatever you're building, you just have to solve that particular problem. All other features can come in later, right? Just think about the enjoyment of the game. All other things can come in later, right? So, in fact, in my game design journey process, I think I've created more than one game. All of those remain as mere ideas or just some versions of ideas, just some they've been executed till certain level, have not been completed. But in my process of game design journey, I think I've made a lot of games, and the only reason why I've been able to do that is I was willing to test it a lot. I was being okay with people saying it's not good. I was okay with people saying, "भाई मजा नहीं आ रहा, बकवास game है," and that's fine, right? But if someone was to start off with game design, I think these are just a couple of mindset principles which you should be okay with. That test, test, test. Basically, test it out, fail fast, create a feedback mechanism, create a feedback loop, right? And uh, keep a track of whatever is working, whatever is not working, right? And understand that there will be different audiences. So you're the one, and it's a creative process, right? There's something which I learned the hard way as well. It's a creative process. There is no depth to which you can go, right? You can keep on digging your hole down, 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 but you need to realize when to stop as well, right? Because you can be stuck in the product development process for a very long time, but you don't want to do that. You just want to make something out, ship it out, see the feedback, and then build it on further, right? So but anyone who's willing to start out a board game, I think it's very easy, that first rough your fare out your idea on ChatGPT, right? Then if you're slightly good on designing, go to Canva, design a couple of cards. If you're making a simple card game, right? Just make use things here and there. Make a just be able to make a game out of anything, right? Basic A4 size sheet work before basic cards work. Print them out or cut the A4 size sheets, make a card, make people play it. Start by playing the game. It doesn't have to be very aesthetic appealing. Just start and test it out. Once you start, keep on testing it out. That's when you'll keep on getting a feedback, right? And when you'll keep on getting a feedback, people will be mentioning other games. People will be drawing references. So you also have to try to understand what is the user psychology with respect to things, right? कि अच्छा अगर लोग ऊनो का एग्जांपल बार बार दे रहे हैं तो क्या होगा वो मतलब ऊनो से हम क्या बोरो कर सकते हैं, right? Also, with anything, I think number one step while you're fleshing it out is also that you need to understand your target audience, right? You cannot make a complex thing. You cannot make a serious game for people who don't play board games, right? You cannot make a non-serious game for people who play board games, right? So just try to identify your target audience as well. And the only thing which you've got to do is just test, right? Once you then have got good enough traction on your game. So the multiple ways, talking more about game design, just in case if someone wants to learn from the process, is that you can take multiple routes in it. One is that you can go for self-publishing, which is something which I did. Self-publishing is that you take your design, you make the artwork, right, and then you print it yourself. Print it yourself as in I give it to a manufacturer who prints it for me, right? The pro with this is that I own the entirety of it. The cons of it is that I have to put my own capital into the production, right? The second way is that you sell it to a publisher, right? That you become the designer, then you sell it to a publishing house or publisher. There are multiple gaming companies which do that. Hasbro, Metal, for example, right? Very difficult to get into them, but lots of other board gaming companies do that in India, that you sell it to a publisher. So what happens in that route is you sell off the game to you publisher, and you first together work on the game, refine the game, make the game perfect, because you are the designer. You know how to. You have made the game, but the publisher knows how to sell the game, right? So you basically combine those two elements, and then you work together, work on the game. And once you've worked on the game, then you are given some royalties of the game, right? And then the publisher then sells it, and then you keep on giving royalties. So that is the second way. Third way is also something called PNP, which is called print and play. And if it's a simple card game and you just want people to experience it and play it, what you can do is you can simply upload a printable version of your game online, and then ask people to print and play and give you feedback. So that is a good way of doing that as well, right? But yes, I think that is about the process of game design. Also, if you're designing a game, I don't think So one of the limitations, one of the good things and the bad things of a board game is that you need physical people to play the game with, right? That if I'm living alone, I can't play the board game myself, right? But then again, this is a problem. Every problem has a solution, and this problem also has a solution. There are multiple online tabletop simulators, Tabletopia, TTS, on which basically you can put the assets of your game, and then people can play it in an online way. So again, there are solutions for you to test out your game. There is everything available. The only thing which one, if they are interested in making a board game, is just to try it out, just to play it with people, and then create the feedback loop and then learn from it.
And like the unit economics of it, Yajur, like does it get better over time in terms of the margins and what you can make out of it? Or like how do you navigate that aspect, especially if you're like a new early board game designer? Like
Hmm. So I think um, I'm uh, I'm very new to the industry. Definitely comment on it, but what I think is it's very difficult to become rich by only selling board games. Right. It might be a controversial thing. It might be, and these are just my thoughts, right? Because the margins are good enough. The margins is something which is not a problem with, right? But with the inherent nature of a board game is that it is a slow-moving product, right? Till the time it is made into educational usage, till the time it has other usages for entertainment, it's a slow-moving product, right? For people who are serious board gamers, they play board games a lot, right? But again, they are a very small number. They're a very minuscule portion of the population, right? So board gaming is definitely growing in India, is what I'm seeing around me. Because, for example, I live in Gurgaon, right, and there are board gaming meetups happening every day of the week, somewhere or the other. Right, this was not the case 3 years back or 2 years back. In Bangalore itself, there are 7 cafes which have copies of my game, right? So they are definitely the people have the opportunity to play startup at 7 different locations throughout the week, right? So I think definitely the board gaming curve is growing, but it is still very nascent as of now, right? So US, I think, as there's a lot to learn from the international board gaming market, because there the conventions, there the fan following about the board games is insane, right? Here in India, I think as of now, um, it's a very niche market. It is growing, definitely, right? But the unit economics are good enough when you talk about a single product point of view, right? But the nature of the product being slow moving is something which is slightly difficult to which is slightly difficult to tackle, right? Also, so there's also a mindset problem which comes here, is that board games are for kids, right? I can't tell you, Abhishek, the number of times when I've told people that it's a game. People are like, "Acha, bachcho ke liye." I'm like, no, it's not for kids. The minimum age someone has actually bought my board game is 24.
yeah,
Well, out of the limited 50 data set which I have, um, the minimum age is 24. So actually, the people who are much older are actually buying games, right? So that's also a mindset shift which you want to, which if is broken in India, then I think the board gaming industry will definitely have a huge scope. But I think um, again, slightly controversial, but if you're looking to make off money from board game, that's making a board game as of now in India is not the best way to go about it. It,
interesting.
it could be start something of as a passion,
Yeah,
but solely making board games is not something which uh is would the right way. And I'm saying this because I honestly also am not going through that route, right?
yeah,
I am also my main focus is the education aspect, right?
right.
Board games are just one part of it. I wouldn't be too surprised if 6 months down the line, I am working towards building something in the online space, online game, right? For entrepreneurship. So I am more driven by entrepreneurship, and I just see games as a medium to educate people about it. But if you were to ask me if someone was to build in the board game space, sort of start off with doing it a hobby first at initially, right? And then maybe take it up full time, because the market is not very ripe as of now. It is changing, but it is not extremely ripe as all the other industries, is what I would say.
Very interesting. Thanks for being so honest and vulnerable about that. And I think it's also dependent on your own unique journey, right? And I think it's your understanding of the market. And I remember speaking to Zain, who's created Shasan recently, and his experience was also so interesting. Like his was politics, right? He was trying to teach politics through a board game. And just speaking to both of you, I realized that y'all are sort of the pioneers in this market, building the communities, building the space. But you know I think it's getting there. The community is coming. I think seeing it go into tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities and that spread, I feel like it's very community driven. But thank you for pushing that needle in a lot of ways.
Yes, so I think I had a very pessimistic outlook towards what, as in what I said, was a sort of a pessimist outlook. But I'm for sure that it will grow, right? But I think it needs more push as of now, is all I'm trying to say.
Got
So I think Zen as well has done a phenomenal job in creating Shasan, right? Because every time I ask people that have you played Startup Eye, they're like, "What is it?" And like, it's a board game. Oh, is it like Shasan?
it.
Is a lot I've heard about it, right? So I think they've done a phenomenal job in terms of marketing the product, right? So that is the kind of product. So that is the kind of marketing which will actually make people aware about board games and start playing board games.
That's true.
So I think the possibility is huge, but India is slowly moving towards that. So I think in a couple of more years, if the board gaming scene was to become ripe, then I want to tell anyone that yes, come in the business of making board games. So it's definitely a good hobby to pick up. It's definitely growing. But if someone was to leave entirely and start making board games, that is something which I would not suggest from an economics point, from purely a financial point of view.
And I think ये अच्छी बात है कि like instead of saying Catan or Monopoly, young Indians are saying Shasan or Startup Act.
Yes.
I think that's the big change in mindset, because we have a young paying audience that wants like a way to, and a lot of the profits are, moving into foreign markets. So why don't we create an ecosystem here and tap into, especially in the big tier 1 cities? And it's not just Mumbai, Delhi, Bengaluru, Gurgaon. I feel like smaller cities like Jodhpur, Jaipur, like I feel there's such a huge audience that has a lot of free time after work, which we normally spend on things like movies. So, like, which we don't have too many entertainment sources that are widely spoken about. And I think board games is just a very nice way to have candid conversations. And for my final question, Yajur, just to respect time, I just wanted to, and before I go into that, what I will be doing is it's very hard to cover your journey in 1 hour. But Yajur has also done podcasts. So in the show notes, I will be including links to Yajur's podcast. They've done 7 episodes where they've interviewed other entrepreneurs. I will be, if it's okay, linking Yajur's LinkedIn profile and a link to the website as well with all the resources. I recently saw you put up a playthrough video for Startup High.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
working with, talking to 2 other entrepreneurs. So there's like, hours and hours and lots of resources that I will put in the show notes. Please do follow up on that. And that's when you'll really get an understanding. But most importantly, find a cafe close to your house, find someone that has the game or buy the game. I think it's very reasonably priced. And it's a great way if you are a parent. And Yajur hasn't told me to do this. I'm doing this because I've
Yes. Thank you
played
so
the game.
much.
If you're a teacher, if you're a parent, and you want your kids to get excited or understand entrepreneurship, I highly recommend it, to buy a copy for your school or your community and, do the same. And I think your kids will really, really enjoy this. So, Yajur, for the last question, can you tell me some recommendations? It doesn't have to be entrepreneurship, but a book, film, or podcast that has really maybe one of each that, you can just tell me to just give people an understanding of something that inspired you and changed or shaped your thinking in one way.
Correct. So first of all, before that, thank you so much for the lovely feedback about startup. It really makes a creator happy, right? And now coming on to the question, very interesting. So I think my podcast of all time, my all-time favorite podcast, right? If you were to ask me that, Yajur, I'm putting up this podcast, would you mind watching it again? I would like, no, not at all. I can watch that anytime. It's slightly related to entrepreneurship, but there is one person whom I follow a lot, Naval Ravikant. He's one of the founders of AngelList back in the US, and now has been a prolific actually angel investor into startups, right? And so what one of my favorite podcasts is the one he had with Joe Rogan. So Naval Ravikant and Joe Rogan, on JRE, Joe Rogan Experience. It is on YouTube, and on that podcast, he simply explains his uh, Twitter thread, which goes with the name of How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky. So he talks a lot about happiness, peace, wealth, freedom, and all of these things. And I think my thinking has been shaped. A lot of my thinking has been shaped because of what he has said on the podcast, right? Because of introspection and what. So one podcast which I would recommend for sure is the Joe Rogan Experience with Naval Ravikant. That's for sure. Book. There is one book which I've been meaning to read. So I've not exactly been inspired by this, but I've been told by so many people about the book. So this is something which I want to read, and I think I recommend to other people as well. I haven't read it myself, but my brother recommends it to me. My the founder at the Food Tech Ventures recommended to me is Never Split the Difference. There's a book on negotiation, right? And if I were to recommend a movie or rather a TV series, just sort of fun, I think Peaky Blinders is a good watch. Yes. Completely out of entrepreneurship, but yes.
Awesome, awesome. So thank you, Yajur. We really appreciate your time. And for the listeners tuning in, please do follow the show notes for more updates about Startup High. I recently got to attend like a playthrough here in Mumbai, and thank technology for connecting us. I reached out to Yajur on LinkedIn, and we got to do this conversation. But I wanted to end the podcast on that note. Do look up Startup High. They have an amazing landing page where you can learn more about the game, and I'm sure there's a cafe in your city where you can play the game as well. Until next time, this is Abhishek Shetty, the Teacher Tuber, signing off. Keep learning. Thank you.